Hey, good afternoon and welcome to our first meeting of August. Our invocation tonight will be given by Councilman Matt Harvin in respect to the flag, be led by Mayor Pro Tem John Roberts. Please rise.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for letting us live in a great area. I pray for our community with the tragic loss in the last few weeks of a high school student and a local police officer in a neighboring city. I pray for their family, their friends, and our communities moving forward. I pray for each employee, our police and our fire that protect us, and our entire staff to make decisions pleasing in your eyes. I pray for our council that we can make decisions that will lead our community forward in a positive way, and we ask for your direction in making these decisions. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The minutes of our July 24th meeting were distributed. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Not hearing any, do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
First by Mrs. Newton.
Second.
Second by Dr. Thompson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes of July 24th passed unanimously. We have 3 items of old business, and the first item is request second reading of ordinance 2311 to amend Article 12, the signage of the City of Anderson's zoning ordinance. Ms. McEwen?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. First, I want to say this ties into Plan the City, which is part of our comprehensive plan that we're putting together. It's a 10-year plan by state law, but it's really a very long-range planning tool for us. And as we do that, you know, we've been seeking public engagement over the last year. We've had a lot of conversations on that. And of course, it's branded Plan This City, and that's our comprehensive plan. At our council retreat, April 27th to 28th of this year, we worked extensively with our consultants who came in and spoke about, of course, where we were with Plan This City, the comprehensive plan, and then also the comprehensive plan and the targets and goals for the development of the city in there leads to a unified development ordinance. And right now we call that our zoning ordinance, which encompasses a lot of things, including signage. And so in this case, there was a lot of agreement coming out of the retreat to move these items forward. As we're seeing development pressure for tree preservation, landscaping requirements, and also signage. You most recently just passed the landscaping requirements, and on second reading tonight, you have the signage. We'll say that July the 10th, we did have a work session on signage, discussion there. It passed first reading as well, unanimously, 8-0. We were missing one member of the council, and then on the July 24th meeting, we had it for second reading. There was the direction by council then just to continue the item for some additional research. That research has been completed by staff, and then tonight we had a work session just prior to this meeting where good discussion took place among council and recommendations were heard from staff. And with that, to go over the overview of the signage ordinance again, Mr. Maurice McKenzie, our Planning Development Director.
Great, thank you. The city manager covered that really well as far as the process we've gone through to this point, but you as a council identified that certain elements of the zoning ordinance can have significant impacts on the appearance of the community. As Mr. McEwen mentioned, last month you approved the new landscape tree preservation guidelines. That was on July 10th, I believe. So now we've been focused on updating the sign regulations because our development practices, our preferences in the city have changed a lot. So we see that this is an area of immediate need. So that's why we're covering the sign regulations as we continue to update the zoning ordinance. But a few things just to go over that are the major revisions compared to what we currently have in our sign guidelines, is that content-specific standards are being eliminated for compliance with a previous Supreme Court ruling. The guidelines will just be easier to read, interpret, and you'll see several changes and improvements with wall sign sizes, the types of the signage, quantity. They're being revised to ensure they're proportional to the buildings and the lots where they're associated. And the appearance and quality of the signs will just have better materials. You'll see that immediately with landscaping as well. Freestanding signs, the signs by the street, they will consist of monument-style signs. Your typical pole signs will no longer be allowed. And a comprehensive sign plan guideline is built into the sign regulations. That'll help provide flexibility in the application of the sign standards through a discretionary approval process for unique circumstances. That'll give an opportunity to look at the sign regulations in a different manner, in a more creative manner. And the conformance to the guidelines will be handled through various triggers for replacement. In the event with multi-tenant signage, since you have multiple tenants, there will be a 10-year amortization for the removal of multi-tenant signs, but the removal of the other signs that will be considered non-conforming will be handled through various triggers that are built into the guidelines, and we discussed that at length, I believe, at the last meeting. Again, this is part of an overall update to our zoning ordinance or unified development ordinance, and that will be considered for adoption in the coming months, other elements of that. But again, City Manager mentioned what's taken place thus far with the City Council. You did approve this on first reading at your July 10th meeting, and there were some requested revisions incorporated to the document at that time. And at your last meeting on July 24th, you did continue the discussion to the meeting tonight, just so you could address public comments and suggestions. And those additional edits have been made, or most of them were incorporated into the document that's in front of you tonight. And again, we had good conversation this evening at a council work session. So that's where we left it. But again, it's coming to you tonight for second reading.
Thank you. And I've been meaning to ask this, but from maybe a very high level, the Unified Development Ordinance, months going forward, but what are some of the, we've knocked off Ward 1 and possibly 2, what's next in that process?
We're seeing a lot of residential development throughout the city. Not just residential, but all sorts of development, commercial and residential. So really, you'll probably see coming up some changes to our subdivision requirements, which deal with how land's graded, how developments are actually put on the ground in the city. So that's not quite as easy as landscape and signs, relatively speaking. So it's going to take a little bit more discussion, I'd say, and a lot more back and forth. But you'll probably see that. You see that change as we kind of flesh out more of that, what that public mandate is from Plan the City.
But it's a big thing, and we're making changes to it. I know that we had good discussion in regards to item number 1. And are there any other questions or continued discussion on this one particular item?
On which one?
Ms. Stewart? Yeah.
What are you supposed to, just one or?
Just the agenda item. Now, we do have the proposal from the recommendation from the management team, but I'm just talking in general of the signage order that we passed unanimously a couple of weeks ago, well, a month ago or so. But comments? Mr. Stewart?
Just want to make sure, when we talked about changing the wall signage, I guess in our downtown business, and where we had white, what we originally approved unanimously the last time, and now we're removing that. So if I'm going down a central business district, I may see red, yellow, green, pink, orange, just an array of colors down the street. Is that what we really want our downtown to look like, or do we want, I thought our initial conversation was going to be like some type of conformity, or just want to kind of get some understanding.
Well, I'll say that's for the windows, the window signage, the vinyl window signage that goes on there, and that's what they consider their sign. And you'll see some restaurants and some other stores downtown that have that now, and I think it looks decent. I know we pointed out that white definitely is more visible and stands out on glass, especially when it's reflective and so forth. But there's some businesses now that have multicolored graphics on there as their sign, and so we're suggesting that we continue to allow that.
Why did we originally think that white was best after seeing that, just from my understanding? And what made the change today to reverse our thought process?
Well, it's the most common, I'd say, white, on white vinyl window signs. And again, that color preference would only apply to window signage downtown. So within our central business district, only window signage. So the original draft said white because that was kind of a standard color, and it's most common. There are a few downtown businesses that have non-white vinyl window signs. The thought being with this draft and striking the white requirement would just allow a little bit more flexibility. If somebody wanted gold or had a multicolor window sign that otherwise complied, but except for the color, might give them some more flexibility.
Other question I had, and I got two questions. One, under 12.052, under the display period, it talks about additional display time may be allowed for properties actually marketed for sale or lease, or if an emergency circumstance warrants the additional signage duration for a public purpose. Explain to me what that second portion, give me an example of what that would be.
So there's some broad language in case law that talks about public purposes for signage. I'm not really qualified to explain what that means, but both Greenville and Columbia had similar language to talk about and kind of handle how case law treats signage in that manner. Sign requirements in general are very heavily litigated, and so I think there's some very specific language that has to carry through from ordinance to ordinance, and I think that's really just what you see here.
A particular example.
If there's a sign that is up on a piece of property that doesn't meet our requirements for time or duration or for size and duration, say it's hey, there's a sinkhole in this property, stay away. Your temporary sign's up too long, but so we could tell them to take it down, but it probably wouldn't be very safe if we told them to take their sinkhole sign down. So that's just thinking off the cuff.
And then I guess my last question, is what we were talking about before the meeting started in our work session is, I just think that, we, as a city, we try to, make sure we have some accountability. We issue building permits for contractors for accountability, standpoints. We got business license for accountability standpoints. And I just think that we ought to have some type of sign permit requirements for people who want to take out signs. Now I can understand residential, but at least in commercial property, I think that, our staff, we're going to have to figure out, one, is if it's still being listed for an MLS or not, or is it still being actively marketed? Two, is it in a state of disrepair? What are those definitions of state of disrepair? And I just think it puts, we got a lot of burden on our staff, but I think if, you have some type of permit in place, we've got something to hold those developers to some type of standards. And right now, without having any permits, they're not really, it just puts it more on us and less off of them. So I'm in favor of issuing some type of, it's nothing but a yearly permit fee, something that has some teeth to it. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Lockridge.
can I ask a question to you, Councilman Stewart?
Sure.
What do you mean by accountability? And what kind of dispensation should happen to a person who doesn't meet the requirements?
I don't know. I don't know what the dispensation is. I would think that our staff, has something in this ordinance, that talks about if you don't meet these requirements, other than just saying Maurice is going to come around in a pickup truck and pick your sign up. Is there any, you know, is there any other accountabilities or, you know, there fines list, you know, a zoning violation, you know, for people who are not being held accountable, or if the sign, it's been sitting out there for 4 years and you can't read it, or you can read 2 of the letters on it, you know, then what is the accountability to make them go do that? So I think some type of permit would, you know, help hold that to a higher standard.
Well, I will say, if there's any violation in here and reaches to that level, you can always write a courtesy summons for it. And not just a summons itself, up to $500 fine, plus assessment, state assessment. So you can always do that with any municipal code. So, I mean, usually it just doesn't, in zoning, get to that point. It has in some cases, but not typically for temporary signs.
I can remember
Yeah.
a sign, you know, that a piece of property the city just purchased down by old McCants that sat out in a vacant field for 20-something years, and it never moved, and it got so bad, you know, but, and there's more areas across the city that have signs like that, but,
The only exemption that's proposed in the ordinance would be for the requirement for a sign permit or sign permit fee for temporary signs on a property that's actively marketed for sale or lease. So they would still have to follow all the other requirements of the code in regard to how that sign's maintained, how it's presented, how it's placed on the property. You just we wouldn't require a permit or a permit fee for that sign to exist.
and with all the property that's being listed in the city of Anderson, we have Maurice, and I think we have one other person on staff. Do we even have the staff to be able to hold that to some accountability? Is there any type of software that we have that shows if a piece of property comes off of, you know, a listing or not? Because that's just, I know our staff has got a lot more things to do than sit there to see if something checks up, if it's on the MSL this month or next month, or if the sign's still there. It's just a lot.
Well, so, you know, our staff has the ability to handle sign permits broadly. Yes, they do, absolutely they do. We wouldn't propose something that we couldn't enforce. You know, this language gives us the ability to have a sign removed if it's not placed on a property that's actively marketed for sale or lease. So if we see a sign that's been up there, hey, that's been up there a really long time, maybe it needs to come down.
And
It's
so
not-
many,
we have a way to remove that sign.
What triggers us to see if that property is still being actively marketed or not? How would we know that?
Well, Maurice can speak to it, but we hit areas of the city routinely as far as the code enforcement officers going through there. So
I was gonna say
if
too,
Mr.
I
McKenzie
mean,
wants to speak to that.
got, you know, our eyes and the eyes of the people that we represent, and that's how usually problems filter through us.
That's true.
And we filter them out, so, I mean, we all report, tall grass, you know, parked cars, but to answer your question, I think that would be probably our responsibility and our citizens to help us on things like that. But anyway,
Mr. Mayor, I mean,
Ms. Harvey.
I think, you know, I'm not gonna talk about specific things, but what triggers, you know, a sign, a commercial sign to be moved or not moved is when it's sold. I mean, I don't know of any business that buys a piece of property that wants the for sale sign still in front of it.
Or the lease. The leasing.
Or the lease sign. I mean, nobody, and, you know, how do we know that if it's not empty anymore, you know, or there's nothing to lease? That would be a trigger that sign has to come up. And the second part, you know, from the last meeting, we had the sign ordinance, the community involvement, you know, meeting with local associations, with their members, and, you know, trying to get it more, I don't want to say user-friendly, but sort of user-friendly, that we get, the city gets a better zoning ordinance for signs, and the community, you know, that, I think that's a positive. Anytime you can, and I think this will come back to us. I don't think there's any question. It's going to come back to us for something that we missed in I mean, how many pages is it? I mean, it's long. It's 28 pages of rules. There's something in those 28 pages that we didn't get. And, you know, with these, I'm surprised in 28 pages that we only have 5, amendments now that we've been able to make it better. And I think we'll continue to make it better because the end product is what our citizens deserve. And with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the 5, we certainly talk about it for a long time, 5 summary of changes, and make a motion that we amend this and approve it on second reading.
Second.
Well, first by Mr. Harvin, second by Mr. Newton. Any further discussion?
Mayor, I'll just make this comment. I don't think these modifications, that's the word I'll use, modifications, I don't think they walk back the hours of discussion that we've had on this sign ordinance. To Councilman Harvin's points, I think that this allows us to be a little bit more in tune with some of the feedback that we've received. And honestly, I consider some of the revisions to be, minor. I don't think in the grand scheme of things they're huge. I do think the time limit is something for us to monitor and see how that looks down the road, but I'm certainly in favor of approving it.
I'll piggyback on what Councilman Harvin said as well. I mean, I want to commend particularly Andrew and Maurice for working on this. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, bringing the vested stakeholders to the table, I mean, that's essentially good government. I mean, that's what people want to see. I mean, y'all sat down, I know y'all put in a lot of work with Michael, Western Upstate Association of Realtors. I mean, obviously they have an interest in this, we have an interest in this, and sitting down at the table with them, getting their feedback, and obviously it seems like it was a good process. It's like y'all shaking hands when y'all came in today. And so, I mean, I think that's what people want to see. That's what a couple weeks ago when we continued this over to this meeting, that's, I think, what we wanted to see. So I'm just appreciative of the hard work that y'all put in, both organizations and parties.
Thank you. Ms. Stewart?
Make no mistake, with my questions, I just want to make sure that it's fair across the board. And I do appreciate, our firm that we've hired outside of Chicago to help come in, to help us with our changes, and our staff and all the public process, trying to get here. I think, from talking and listening to all of us on council at our retreats, we want to see our city get rid of the clutter in the city. We want to see our city looking good, and I think that's the purpose of our discussion. And whether we agree or disagree on things, I think in the end, that's what we all want. And but I just want to make, I know there is a motion and a second on the table, and I just want to make sure for clarity, this is just for the 5 changes and not for the last changes on our proposal here today. Is that what the motion was?
Motions for the summary of changes 1 through 5, and there's an asterisk. Is that not been made, or is that has been made already in the language?
It wasn't included in the red line copy. Staff doesn't recommend that change, but it is available if you feel like it's something you want to change.
So that's the central business district, the 5 to 10%, currently proposed 5%, and the central business district 10%, neighborhood commercial. I thought that was already in.
It wasn't incorporated, but it was recommended by the Realtors Association, so I included it in full transparency, but staff doesn't recommend that.
So you might want to amend your motion.
Well, you just say 1 through 5. So
1 through 5.
It's not including the asterisk.
Yeah,
That's
1
how
through 5.
Including the asterisk.
Including the
not including the asterisk.
Not including.
I just want to make sure I understood. That's all.
Not including. Correct.
Ms. Roberts?
If I may. So one thing I just kind of want to point out, when all this came to light back in April, right? Y'all remember the big presentation was, we spent a lot of time on actual size of the signage. Okay, and that hit home, that drove home, there were a lot of questions asked that day. And it kept kind of House of Levine, they were pretty emphatic about the size of signage. Then we're talking about how it'll impact our community, how it'll impact our community and what it's going to look like and what it's going to change. I know we've done a lot to impact our community with regard to business signs.
building signage, but with regard to temporary signage, I don't think we're doing much right this moment. And I appreciate all the work everyone's put in and work together on it. I'm just curious if we could take it a step further and think about one other thing. I mean, one of the items being amended is we're also increasing the square footage in this proposal, by the way. So it's not much, it's very minor, but it was to take it to 32 square feet for commercial property. So you could have 3 32 square foot signs out in front of your commercial property, along with the banners for a multi-tenant parcel. Should make that very clear. So are we having an impact on that?
General, commercial, light industrial, and heavy?
Heavy.
Right, bigger, okay, go ahead.
Which is a significant portion of our surrounding outskirts. So, anyway, I'm just curious if we, maybe too little too late, I don't know, I'm just having some brainstorming thoughts, but, made the 4x8s a temporary permit type situation and keep it, standardize it to 4x4s for the rest of the business classifications. Neighborhood professional, neighborhood commercial, limited office. Just a thought.
Good discussion.
But and also as part of that, I think there was some mention in the work session that we need to also address the number of banners in here.
You made a comment. Let me find it. Well, it was a comment on the number of freestanding signs allowed.
And then we can also have
And
equal number of,
that would apply to properties actively marketed for sale or lease. You made the comment that no more than one such freestanding sign would be allowed per property. And are you suggesting that apply to banners as well, per unit or per tenant, basically?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because right now it's not, there's no limit to it, correct? I mean, it says 3 on there, but
There's really no limit to the number of freestanding signs, freestanding temporary signs,
For each unit.
yeah. Well, per property, we talk about per property, so.
So you can have how many freestanding signs per property?
You have 3 temporary freestanding signs, so that's the ground mounted temporary sign and the post sign. Well, that doesn't apply, but, yeah. So there could be a multi-tenant building with 3 freestanding temporary signs out there. And then each unit could potentially have a wall banner as well, advertising, say if it's all vacant, there's 7 tenant spaces and they're all vacant, you have 7, 1 per unit, 7 plus 3 freestanding temporary signs out on the road.
But I guess probably, and even before this, and I could be wrong, did we have that situation happening beforehand? Does anybody, I can't think of a situation, maybe I'm
I don't
not.
think so.
I mean,
I think it's more just a clarification. Just numbers.
I get it.
Doing it up front. That's really my point, not against.
Yeah.
Well, and I will commit, just like I did, I do with all of our ordinances that you guys consider and approve, is they are words on a page. If it's not working to our satisfaction, if it's not giving us what we as a community expect from our
Which I
ordinances,
think
then we'll come back and change.
Mr. Harbin and Mr. Martinez pointed out too. I mean, at some point, if it doesn't work, somebody said it always comes back to us. So we had a first and a second. Go ahead.
To follow up on Mayor Pro Tem Roberts' question, so the number of banner signs is unlimited at this point. We didn't specify 1 per unit, if I'm not mistaken. It's just, there was no limit.
So for a single tenant, let's see, hang on. Let's see, for multi-tenant buildings, a maximum of 1 permanent or permitted temporary sign may be displayed per tenant space on a lot with multi-tenant building. And then in no instance more than 3 freestanding temporary signs may be displayed concurrently.
What about banner signs?
So that would be lumped in with that permitted temporary, that banner sign, 1 per tenant space. So, yeah, that would be the limit. And then single tenant, a maximum of 1 temporary sign per lot with a single tenant building. So
And one banner sign.
1 banner or 1 freestanding sign.
It seems to me the kicker to this could be that once this begin to happen, and we see it's not achieving what we want, or it is achieving, we have a big concern, then we can bring it back to the council and make the changes. So we gotta start somewhere and move on with this to see how it's gonna work. So with that motion.
We already had first and second.
Yeah.
No further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. A second item of old business, request second reading of ordinance 2313, amending the 2022-2023 annual budget. Mr. McEwen.
Okay, thank you. This is addressing amendment to the previous year's budget as we are going through our financial audit report for the year. This addresses different revenues or expenses that could not have been anticipated during the year or at time of writing the budget prior to the 22-23 budget being adopted, such as grants. So you have a grant and revenue, then you would have a grant expense, and a lot of it's that. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Marta Martin, our CFO, to go over the details of it on second reading.
Thank you. So the City Council adopted the 22-23 annual budget by ordinance in June of 2022. This budget amendment request tonight is to reflect the City Council approval of revenues and expenditures that occurred after the original budget was implemented, grants received, or use of prior year funds carried forward to the new fiscal year. The detailed ordinance was included in your packet, and I did review these line items in detail at the first reading on July 24th. So we are requesting approval of ordinance 2313, amending the 22-23 annual budget by increasing the general fund budget $2,240,836, the stormwater budget $229,384, the cemetery fund budget $53,350, the hospitality fund budget $1,707,194, and the transit fund budget $7,854.
Thank you. Comments, questions? As Ms. Martin said, we did go over this on the first reading. I don't see anything that's any different.
In that case, I move that we adopt this.
Second.
First by Mr. Lockridge, second by Dr. Thompson. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next request is request second reading of ordinance 2314, authorizing the execution of an easement to Anderson County across city property at 1305 Whitehall Road. Mr. McEwen.
This is city property where we have a water storage facility on Whitehall Road, just at the tracks across from the silos. Backs up to the old TTI that Anderson County also now owns. Anderson County provides sewer service to that portion of the county, and they are working on sewer improvements and requested an easement which does not interfere with our infrastructure for a force main line. So it's just a small force main line that goes across the property, doesn't interfere with our infrastructure. We're recommended on second reading to be passed.
Thank you. Again, any additional comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve it on second reading.
We have a first by Mr. Stewart,
Second.
second by Mr. Harbin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously on the second and final reading. We'll go on to new business, and our first item of new business is request consideration of appointments to the Board of Architectural Review and the Board of Zoning Appeals. Mr. McEwen.
Okay, we're making good progress on making appointments to our different various planning commissions, boards, and so forth. And with that, we did send out an email in advance of applications of two that we have here for consideration. We didn't hear anything back, and Maurice McKenzie can go over first the positions and then also the applicants for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Yes, back in July, we brought to you several reappointments to the boards and commissions, and also some new appointments to the boards and commissions. We had several vacancies, and fortunately, we were able to fill many of those slots at that meeting in July. Now, we still have a few vacancies on our boards and commissions. As you can see, on the Board of Architectural Review, we still are in need of a representative from the Boulevard Historic District, and also the Field of Construction, and that's a newly created position. If you recall, there was a position on the Board of Architectural Review for a representative from Anderson Heritage. That organization is no longer active, so you requested that we replace that position with someone from the Field of Construction. So you have those two positions available on the Board of Architectural Review right now. On the Board of Zoning Appeals, we need a representative from the Field of Architecture, and also we have two at-large positions still open. And then on the Planning Commission, we have one vacancy, and that would be Dr. Thompson's appointment to that board. So that's where we are currently, but we are fortunate to have received a couple of applications over the past couple of weeks from two people that are willing to serve on our boards and commissions. One is David Bass, who's with Daniel Builders. He's a contractor. He's interested in serving in that newly created contractor's role on the Board of Architectural Review. Also, we have an application from Aaron Jeffers, who is an architect with McMillan, Paz & Smith. He has submitted an application to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals in the architecture position. And in your packet, you have both applications to review. And if they are appointed, their terms will be for 4 years, will expire on June 30th, 2027. So again, the city manager mentioned we did send these applications to you a couple of weeks ago, and we do recommend the appointments of David Bass to the Board of Architectural Review and Aaron Jeffers to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And the staff, we've met with both, we've had conversations with both of them, and we do think they will bring a high level of expertise and professionalism to both of the boards respectively.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Mr. Roberts?
Point of clarification, which of these or both or neither require the applicant to reside in that, well, for example, the Boulevard Historic District?
But for the Boulevard Historic District,
Right.
that representative would need to reside in the Boulevard Historic District.
Does he?
I'm sorry?
Does that applicant reside in the?
We're not filling that.
No, right now,
We're doing just the,
this is for the Field of Construction position on the BAR, and the applicant does reside inside the city. And then for the Board of Zoning Appeals, that's the Field of Architecture position we're working to fill, and that applicant also lives inside the city limits.
but I think even on one of these, we determined that they didn't have to live in the city. Which one? Am I wrong?
The planning commission is required.
Okay,
In the process
Yep.
of getting someone for that position,
okay, great,
But it is required.
In the planning commission,
It
in the
is.
planning commission.
yes.
okay. So Jeff, you good?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
I was probably not square on that, but.
Good. Any other questions, comments?
I'll just say, good job. I think both these individuals, for one, it's sometimes difficult to find a qualified applicant to come in and step in and add value. I see both these individuals doing that, so congratulations on that, and I'll make a motion that we approve it.
Second.
We have a first by Mr. Martinez, second by Mr. Newton. The open positions on the BAR and zoning appeals, they can come from any council member, not district specific in regards to
That's
what's
right.
open.
The Planning Commission is set up where, it used to be where the council member would appoint someone from their actual council seat area. But several years ago, you did make a revision to where the Planning Commission, for the city council to appoint a representative that resides anywhere inside the city limits. As far as the other boards are concerned, yes, we would take recommendations from anyone, and we're always seeking applications from interested citizens that are willing to serve on the boards.
And the reason I would challenge us all to really get these boards and commissions fully seated.
Yes.
Just because sometimes when you happen to catch a video or a live feed where you just barely have sometimes you don't even have a majority to be able to conduct business. So, but let's double down and think real hard about filling these other seats. Yes, ma'am. Great. So we have a first, a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. We thank those individuals for stepping up to the plate. Our second item, new business, request consideration to purchase equipment for the Public Works Division. Ms. McEwen.
Okay, upon the adoption of our 2023-2024 budget and purchasing capital equipment, we're well underway to continue doing that, trying to get first in line to get a lot of this equipment as it's competitive still with some of the supply constraints and the automotive and the tractor industry. So with that, we have a request before you tonight for Public Works. Mr. Kim Olenax, Public Works Director, will go over that request.
Thank you, Mr. McEwen. Mayor, City Council, we've identified needs in the Public Works Division for some equipment. You should have attached to your packets a list of that equipment that I'll briefly go over and take any questions that you may have. The first item is for the cemetery department is a Sepropel dump trailer. It's a 6-foot by 13-foot trailer that they'll use for opening and closing of the graves there. They're currently using a 3x10 that's in pretty rough shape, and this Sepropel will allow us to be able to, we'll be able to pull it behind a pickup truck, but we'll also be able to, once we get it on site at the different cemeteries, we'll be able to use this to drive out between the lanes and things to excavate the dirt and then to haul it back after the funerals there. The quotes that we obtained were very close. We like the Equipner 3300 Sepropel model. It has a ride-on Sepropel feature versus the walk beside. There's limited space out there a lot of times for us to maneuver around, and we like that model better, so staff's recommending the purchase of the Equipner 3300 from the Equipner LLC in the amount of $28,195. The second item, the second and third item are for the sanitation department. The second item's a wheel loader. It's with a 4-in-1 bucket. This is the tractor that you see out on the routes on a daily basis that are picking up the curbside debris. And those things go through. They take a pretty heavy pounding out there with the amount of volume that they're picking up out there. We actually obtained, we have a state contract quote there from Case Machinery, but the one that we're recommending is the New Holland W80C from Old Stone Tractor that is located here in Anderson in an amount of $106,045. And then the third item is a 2024 F650 diesel regular cab with a dump body for the sanitation department. This is the trucks that you see hauling the orange trailers around on a daily basis for the routes. We have a state contract quote from Allen J. Fleet Sales out of Sebring, Florida. They have a South Carolina contract for $106,604. The total amount that we are requesting is $240,000 with a breakdown of cemetery of $28,195 and the capital fund budget of $212,649. So with that, I'll take any questions that you might have about this equipment.
Thank you. Any questions on the three items?
I'd just like to point out that even though we got bids from our state contracts on here, it's always good, and I appreciate you, Kim, for making sure we involve our local vendors here. And even though we had a state contract from Hills Machinery out of Columbia. I'm glad to see Old Stone here locally in Anderson was able to come in and able to utilize local vendors. So I thank you for making sure that we try to utilize local vendors whenever we get a chance.
Yes, sir. I think we'll save some money with doing it this way as well.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Harper.
So in section 2, the wheel loader and 4-in-1 bucket, I noticed we have several of those in use now. And I think I asked this question a few years ago, and I can't remember what the answer was. Maybe before your time, Ken. Thank you. The turf tires, rather than, the off-road tires that I think in one of our newer pieces of equipment, we don't have the big knotty tires, like a real tractor tire, you know what I'm talking about?
Right.
I think we have turf tires, because I would assume most of the time they're on the road.
They are.
They're not driving in a field. And I think the turf tires would give you would think, more stability and more of a lifetime than the tractor tires going down the road.
Right, and with this, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I see the size of the tire on the quote.
Yeah.
But I don't know the
I think your
off-road
newest-
versus the on-road type.
I want the tire that lasts the longest.
Right, absolutely. And we have the ability, and we do go through them a good bit. We have the ability to change those out.
I think on one of the newer ones, you have turf, more like it's a turf tire,
Right.
but it's not it doesn't have ridges this deep.
Right.
That can't be great for our roads to begin
No,
with.
or the equipment.
Yeah, or the equipment beating it.
Right.
And the turf tires that y'all been putting on there are, it's more like a softer.
This W80C is similar. We bought one 2-3 years ago, and we've gotten good usage out of it, more of a road tire than an off-road type tire.
And I have no clue which one's more expensive. It
Yes,
may
sir.
be, the turf tire might be more expensive than the
Right.
tractor tire, or the tractor tire might have.
I'm impressed that you even recognize the difference.
But I think, that would be something, and then secondly, I had a call, obviously, a division of your division has been challenged over the last few weeks, and they said they were out at midnight picking up stuff. And, they didn't call me at midnight, they called me the next morning and said, I cannot believe that city employees were out at midnight. Looked like trying to catch up on picking up stuff, so hats off to your staff, and don't think that it doesn't go appreciated by our citizens, because if they're calling me at 7 in the morning wanting to know why was that city truck out, I can't believe they were out there cleaning up. I think it was out in the Reed Road area.
Yes, sir. We get calls, and I didn't realize it before I got in Public Works, just how many calls and how many trees fall. And they never fall between 8 and 5. They fall after 5. And so pretty much, especially with the storms that we've had recently, it's been all hands on deck. So our priority is, we have state roads inside the city, and we have local roads as well, but our priority is to get those roads open as quickly as possible, because we know people have to get out of their driveways and they have to get from here, to work and places like that. So it really is. I appreciate you mentioning that.
We'll pass that along to
Yes,
the
sir.
people that were out there at midnight. With that, I'd make a motion to approve this, Mayor.
Second.
First by Mr. Harbin, second by Mr. Lockridge. Any further discussion?
I'll just add to what Councilman Harvin was saying about the turf tires versus the off-road. I can see your point, Councilman Harvin, going down the road, but sometimes I guess when you're on the, picking up that stuff, I would think, I may be wrong, that a turf tire may be more susceptible to puncturing than what an off-road tire would be when you're, running over debris and trying to pick it up and putting it in the back of trucks, where a limb pops in it or whatever. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's a good point. I see exactly what you're saying.
Good. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you,
y'all.
Mr. Mullen. Thanks. Our third item of new business is request consideration of an ordinance amending Article 5 of Chapter 78 of the Anderson City Code by adding Section 78-209 regarding wastewater industrial pretreatment fees. Ms. McCune.
Okay, thank you. We did have a work session on this at the July 24th meeting. Seems a little while ago, but we had a work session prior to our council meeting to discuss this and the implementation of these, an update to the fees. Our sewer use ordinance, of course, covers our sewer utility side of the house. And we, of course, have two large wastewater treatment plants that serve the majority of Anderson County. With that, we receive what we refer to as industrial waste or industrial sewage to these plants. What brought this forth, we need to review the fees and take a full view of this, but it brought forth a request from Anderson County government, some discharge that they needed to put at our treatment plants. We're able to accommodate that. It comes from the landfill. And with that, though, we didn't have a way to charge for that. We didn't have any fees in place. And so we looked at this section in particular, which is, it would fall under our pre-treatment program. Mr. Banks is here tonight, our utilities director, and he'd go over the details and cover the fees, the summary of the fees. And let me add, we did have a public hearing at 5 o'clock tonight. Consistent with state law that says anytime you adopt fees or review fees that you have a public hearing. Usually our fees and all that's put into the budget and there's a public hearing as part of the budget. With this being separated out and us doing this as a standalone ordinance or update, we did have that tonight. There was no public comment. We've had no calls on this topic. So with that, Mr. Banks.
Good evening. As Mr. McEwen said, we according to our sewer use ordinance, we can charge surcharges for industries where the waste that they're giving us has loadings higher than normal domestic type waste. We currently do have a surcharge fee that has been instituted for several years but has not been looked at. As you are well aware, chemicals and electricity have all gone up in recent history, so therefore we're coming to you tonight to request that we would raise those parameters. Those parameters consist of biochemical oxygen demand, chemical oxygen demand, total suspended solids, total phosphorus, and total Kjeldahl nitrogen. We have been charging for the last several years 25 cents per pound over those loadings that we have set forth. We're recommending that be 30 cents per pound. Likewise, as Mr. McEwen kind of mentioned, most of our industries, or not most, but up until this point, all of our industries, we get the waste through the pipelines. In this particular case, they are hauling it to us. We do not have a haul fee. So therefore, we're recommending a $10 per 1,000 gallon fee delivered because it's hauled rather than coming through our pipelines. And then lastly, while we're doing these fees, most of our fees on the pretreatment side we have a consultant that does a lot of our the sampling and the inspections, and it's a pass-through. But even with the consultant doing that, it does require some staff time. So we're also recommending a $50 administrative fee as a holistic approach to our pretreatment fees.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, any comments? Mr. Roberts?
Mr. Banks, if my math is correct, that's a 20% increase from where we stand currently.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Which is, I would say, easily justified.
Actually, 23.8%. But anyway, go ahead.
And it's definitely in line with what some of the other wastewater utilities in the area charge for similar fees for the industries in their areas.
Right. So I do think that's reasonable. Also, don't we require our industry to pre-treat? But in this case, this is one of those exceptions where we're going to accept their wastewater that doesn't fall within the parameters.
We
treat.
Most of the time we will accept waste if it for like these type parameters, because these are what I would call normal wastewater parameters, similar to domestic. It's just slightly higher. So oftentimes if we have the capacity we will, as other utilities do similarly, we will take these wastes just because it's less expensive for the industry to just pay us the additional cost, where we would normally require a pretreatment process is for metals or something that's not normally treated at our facilities, or likewise, let's say if we were getting close to our capacity headworks loadings at the plants, then we would fall back to the industry to say that we can't take it at the strength that you're giving it to us. And they are currently, because they currently discharge to, or have been discharging to Belton, the city of Belton. The amount of ammonia has been upsetting to their plant, so they are pushing back to, and the landfill is looking at installing a pretreatment facility there at the landfill.
In Belton?
Sir?
In Belton?
Well, not at Belton, at the landfill.
I got you. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Mayor, unless there are other comments, I'll move that we accept this rate increase.
I have a first by Mr. Jeff Roberts.
second it.
Second by Mr. Lockridge. Any further comments?
Do you mind being mayor? I come up 20%.
Did you? I'll check that again. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Banks.
Thank you.
The last item of new business is request consideration of an ordinance authorizing the execution of an easement to Duke Energy Carolinas LLC on city property at 301 South Murray Avenue. Ms. McEwen.
Okay, Assistant City Manager Andrew Strickland has been working on this, coordinating with Duke Energy on this. This is, they approached us and have been wanting to put in a very fast charger. It's the fastest electric vehicle charger they make. It's class 3, which is direct current power to the vehicle itself. And we've been looking at locations. We coordinated with, and in front of you, there's actually a sheet that has a picture of the parking lot behind the Bleckley station and shows a view of what it would look like, or a drawing of what it would look like. The reason this works really well here is, one, mainly because Duke Energy has the electrical switch gear already located. If you look at the picture and you can look at the proposed where it says EV charging and actually see the units to the right, there's some green boxes there. Those are switch gear, high voltage switch gear for Duke Energy. And then they would move over on the other side of the dumpster and put a 500 kVA transformer, which is a significant size transformer that gets it to be able to charge at this rate and then do direct current connections to the chargers themselves. And so that's considered a level 3 charger. I'm not aware of us having, we don't have any level 3 chargers in the city, maybe not in the county. It's the fastest charger they make for electric vehicles, and to give you some idea of that, I'll start off with a level 1 charger, which that's what we do have in our parking garage facility. It will take usually 8 to 10 hours on actually a level 2 here. So it kind of trickles the level 1. That's something that you might have at your house to charge your EV, and it just trickles it in there. So it can take 10 hours plus. You get to the level 2, and those are AC voltage. So the level 2 is basically just 240 volts. So it's just like what your dryer's plugged into at your house. And that will charge for a full charge 8 to 10 hours. But this is a DC fast charging, and it can provide up to 250 miles of range per hour, and can charge 80% of the cars typically in about 20 to 30 minutes at full charge. So that's it's significantly faster. It's the fastest they have available. This is a good location because the electrical infrastructure allows for it. That's why you're not seeing these DC fast chargers just everywhere, because you got to have the high voltage for it. Also, it's a public parking facility, public parking lot. Anybody can use it. Go park there. Also works well with the downtown apartments across the street, of course. More downtown apartments coming. And we see this as a real opportunity, the EV chargers for a destination, being charging destination, if you will, for downtown, to continue to put in these facilities, working with another company now. And so we have a range of options, and that way we can be an attraction off I-85 when you're having charging anxiety and need to pull over to get your car charged, and you can come eat at one of our restaurants while your car's being charged. And so we hope that not only will it serve the community, but the travelers as well. And so with that, we have a recommendation to approve an easement to Duke Energy that allows them to put the infrastructure in on public property.
Seems like a win-win. Any questions, comments?
Just curious,
Go ahead.
Councilman Harvey.
So real quick, so they would put these in, who gets the revenue from what the chargers, Duke owns the chargers, Duke gets the revenue?
Yeah.
So-
Go ahead.
So Duke's program dictates that they pay for the install, they pay for the engineering, the install, all the equipment, for the life of the equipment. They receive the revenue as well.
And of course, they're providing the cost of the electricity,
Yeah.
so that would make sense.
They do the
The
paving,
users
the
pay
striping.
for their electricity just like they would any other charger.
They do the paving, striping, everything.
Yeah.
We don't have any other places in the city that
We
that,
looked
that,
at
that has that high voltage area,
Yeah.
you know, that could, cause I think, you know, to have someone come into our EV stations where they gotta sit there 8 to 10 hours to charge, you know, as you're moving towards more electric vehicles, and I think the more you have where you get these fast charging stations to get people in and out, I think it just makes our city more attractive.
Well, that's, Mr. McEwen said that, this is really the beginning of what we can offer in the city. He did mention we're talking to somebody else. It has a similar program as well, where they pay for all the infrastructure, all the upfit, and then provide the power. And our community receives an amenity that they wouldn't otherwise have, so, no, it's definitely beginning for sure.
And I would say they're probably going, this is the first of many locations for them. And they're identifying, easy access to high voltage, that's currently in place. I'm glad they looked at the central business district. So we're pleased with that and hope to get more.
Any other questions, comments?
One quick,
Mr. Roberts?
so it states for the provision of charging electric vehicles, but then it states for the construction and operation of electrical facilities. But do we need to put any other language in that states and for no other purpose? Should it change down the road?
There's a lengthy agreement that
Okay.
I signed that spelled out exactly what they can and can't do. And so that's contained there. This is just a broad.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Good point.
And that is a good point, Councilman Roberts, because their electrical stations they have here in the city, they're doing major upgrades and modifying the footprints of those electrical stations in Anderson right now, especially the one on Gossett Street.
Yeah, and
Major renovations.
I will say too, in addition to your comment, Mr. Stewart, they do operate under our franchise agreement and our operations agreement that we have in place with them, which stipulates a lot of conditions.
I think it's a win for downtown. I like that we're pioneering it maybe in this location. Maybe there's some other locations we can identify, but we can do it with some homework down the road. And so with that, I'll make a motion that we accept or we approve it on first reading.
Second that.
We have a first by Mr. Martinez, second by Dr. Thompson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously on the first reading. We have an executive session. In executive session, we have section 30-4-70A2, discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual agreements and the receipt of legal advice relating to matters covered by the attorney-client privilege. I entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
We have a first by the Mayor Pro Tem, first by Mr. Lockhart, second by the Mayor Pro Tem. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We're in executive session. Before you leave, we noticed that you're taking notes and you're a scout troop, right? Yes. Tell us who you are. Put you on the spot. You can stand right there.
Okay, my name is Isaac Bruner, if you want my last name.
Yeah. Tell us, what scout troop do you represent?
I'm representing Scout Troop 215,
Well,
which
good.
is like over there somewhere, I think.
All right. First Pres, yeah. Well, good. Thank you for being involved in Scouts. Appreciate y'all coming.
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have to talk about just the stuff in executive session?
entertain a motion to come out of executive session. First by Dr. Johnson, second by Mr. Lockridge. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We stand out of executive session. In executive session, we heard the legal device on a potential city-owned property, and we heard advice from council. No further action will be taken. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First by Mr. Newton,
Second.
second by Mr. Horvath. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.